All right, hello everyone. This is chapter 10 and community corrections. Um, today we're going to be, or this week we're going to be talking about the other side of corrections. So we've gone over institutional corrections, which is all about prisons, jails, incarceration, kind of serving sentences away from the generalized public. But this week, we're going to turn our attention to the other side of corrections, which is serving those sentences while you're still in your community and still able to kind of work and be around your family, things like that, with certain conditions. And so let's start off by talking about what is community corrections. So the definition of community corrections is that it is a sanction that is essentially served in a residential or community setting outside of a jail or outside of a prison. We see that community corrections is the number one type of sentence that's given. There are more people that are on probation or parole than in an incarcerated setting. And so you'll see that there's some statistics here that shared with you about 52 to about that number has gotten up to about 58% of the correctional population is actually serving their time in community corrections or on probation. The reason that it is probably one of the more popular sentence options and that we utilize it so much is because it is more effective. And when we say it's more effective, uh, it's more cost effective. It's cheaper on the system. It may cost um, 30 dollars a day to house someone in a prison or in a jail, where it may only cost maybe 3, 4, 5 dollars a day, really, to kind of do the community corrections uh, uh, sanction. Uh, it's also less stigmatizing uh, in that you don't have the incarceration stigma hanging over your head. You can still work, still do things like that, still make money, still help support your family, all of that. And so you'll see some of the trends. So from the 80s to the or mid 2000s, you started to see the use of community corrections increase. And we saw that due to this notion of deinstitutionalization. And so when we started to see prison overcrowding in the 80s because of the Get Tough on Crime movement, um, the system had to figure out what to do with those offenders who were less violent, and kind of figure out, as we're running out of space in facilities, what can we do? And so the focus really kind of turned to serving those sentences in the community. And a lot of these individuals who serve time in community corrections also have other kind of conditions. So there might be um, conditions for counseling, conditions for community service, things like that. So they're able to kind of repay back their cost to society in the form of some restorative justice mentalities. And so, not everyone gets a sentence of probation. Community corrections, you have heard it called probably probation. Parole is kind of the aftercare. So, probation is essentially you've never gone, you're not serving jail or prison time as a sentence. You are serving that time, that sentence in the community. Parole is a little bit different because parole is you've served time in prison and you're serving out and you're getting out early to serve the remainder of your sentence in the community. So there are certain factors with deciding who gets these type of sentences. And so the number one factor is going to be what we call sentencing guidelines. And so there are guidelines that judges have to go by whenever they hand out certain sentencing. So it may be minimum sentencing, max sentencing, but these sentencing guidelines kind of help them determine what the best type of sentence would be. The next couple are pretty offender specific. And so you have the motivations of why the offender committed the crime. You have some social dynamic factors, such as like, are they employed? Do they have children that they need to take care of? What was the nature of the crime? Was it a less serious crime? If it's less serious, you may be more apt to let them serve that sentence in the community. And if it's like a first time offender type mentality. You also look at the resources that you have available. So community corrections is not just for supervision. Realistically, with community corrections, we're looking at rehabilitation. And as that pendulum is kind of swung back to the restorative justice model, we're really kind of looking at how can we get this offender to not commit more crimes. And so you typically will see some service array added into the sentencing conditions and the probation conditions. So how do we measure success? We say that community corrections is highly effective in that it's cost cutting, and it typically has some better outcomes. So how we measure success is through something called recidivism. That's a very important word for you to know, especially if you are a criminal justice major. You're going to hear this notion of recidivism a lot. And so what we know about recidivism is it's essentially the relapse into criminal offending. And so recidivism is essentially continuing crime. No matter what happens with the sentence. So if you go through a community corrections supervision program and you have successfully completed those conditions and successfully completed your sentence, but then you go out and commit another crime, that's considered recidivism, meaning that we didn't address the needs of your criminal activity, and so you continue doing that criminal activity. And so your book has some updated statistics around 2021. And so we see that about 42% of all probationers exited their probation sentence successfully. That might seem a little like lower to you. However, incarceration has very high recidivism rates. Community corrections actually has pretty good recidivism rates attached to it. Research shows us that those individuals who are incarcerated and serve all of their time in jails or prisons are more likely to recidivate upon their release, because we didn't address program-specific risk needs of that offender very well. And you kind of think about, why is that? Well, why would community corrections have a better impact on recidivism? Well, one of the reasons is because they remain in their community and get help in the community itself. And so there may be employment opportunities. If it's substance abuse, they may be linked to substance abuse therapy and things like that in the community, and get to practice those skills while they're still in the community. We work on changing the environment around them while they're still in the environment. Those that are incarcerated, it's kind of like shock. You come out of incarceration, and depending on how long you've been there, the world has changed a lot. And so you don't know how to operate in this world now. And so some people will commit crimes again after they've been released in order to go back to what they know. That's called institutionalized behavior. And so we say they're institutionalized because they keep committing crime to go back to prison because prison is a safer bet than kind of relearning the world in and of itself. There's some other additional kind of factors that will tell us that someone's going to be successful. So we know that women are more successful with community corrections. Also, if you're married or have a strong social support, you typically are more likely to be successful with community corrections. Um, and that's because you have people holding you accountable. So you don't necessarily have just the criminal justice system holding you accountable, but you have those social supports. We also know that those with jobs and older individuals typically have more success on community supervision because they have some tie to the community. And so remember the social structural theories that we talked about when we talked a little bit about criminology and kind of why people commit crime. Those with strong ties to the community typically will commit less crime. And so there are several programs that work with community corrections that help people start building those ties. So if you think about, excuse me, Alcoholics Anonymous or Substance Abuse Anonymous, like Narcotics Anonymous, um, those programs are meant to help individuals who are actively going through treatment build a community with each other so that they can hold themselves accountable. And so we see that by linking those type of services to community corrections individuals, they typically will have higher success rates and are less likely to recidivate. And so we've talked some about the advantages of community corrections. One of the major advantages is it's less expensive. So it costs maybe about $700 to $1,000 annually for community corrections. Um, but it costs nearly $30,000, if not more now, to house an individual in a correctional institution. So you will see that there's significant financial motivation to having people serve their time in the community. Also, people on probation or community supervision oftentimes pay for their own treatment. And so the system isn't paying for the counseling, substance abuse counseling, things like that. Oftentimes, as part of that person's punishment, so to speak, and I'm trying to get in my camera so you can see punishment, so to speak, that person is responsible for kind of fitting the bill for that. And of course, insurance, things like that can kind of go into play. But one of the biggest things that we see as far as the advantage of community corrections is that members get to continue and build pro-social relationships with friends and family, and still be active in their family, and if they have kids, things like that, while serving their sentence. And so they're still able to, with restrictions. I mean, you're going to see as we talk about this further along, there are conditions that they have to abide by based off of the type of crime that they committed. There can be some pretty extensive and restrictive conditions put on them. But overall, they're serving that in their own community. And so they're still able to take full advantage. And some of them might not even know what all the services are in their community. And so one of the advantages of community corrections is it's that rehabilitative mindset that still allows them to practice what they're learning, practice kind of different skills while they're in their own community and not having to learn it in prison and then wait to get out and practice. And we typically see that fails a lot. So let's talk about the history and where did probation come from. So um, John Augustus is the known as the father of probation. And essentially, probation, kind of our punishments. Remember going back into the 1800s, punishment was really kind of uh, a public foray, I guess you could say. And John Augustus was a member of the community that essentially went and was watching drunkards court. And so during this drunkards court, Augustus stepped up in 1841, and he said, "Judge, let me take this man who was accused of being drunk." He's like, "Give him to me for 3 weeks. Let me teach him skills, and I will make sure that he doesn't commit another crime, which was being drunk in public." And so the judge said, "Okay, I'll let you do that. You've got 3 weeks." And so Augustus took this individual and kind of had the individual help him in his shop, um, gave him some skills to work. And at the end of that 3 weeks, Augustus came back with this man and said, "Judge, this man has not had any new crimes. He is rehabilitated. He's got some skills." And so this was the foundation of what we know as probation. Augustus went on to do the same thing for nearly 1,800 individuals between 1841 and 1859. And so Augustus was our first known probation officer. We didn't call him a probation officer, but he volunteered his time and his energy and his skill set to help individuals be rehabilitated. And so he helped them get employment, he helped them get housing and education. He also recruited other people to help him help others. And so the first kind of probation force was all volunteers. Later, as we kind of professionalized this role in the court, you started to see more like police officers and things like that taking on these roles. But our early day probation is drawn all the way back to 1840s, specifically 1841 and John Augustus. And so I know some of you will be happier with this type of um, correctional intervention. A lot of you asked me about, like, we seem so punitive. Like, when does rehabilitation come in? Well, community corrections is all about rehabilitation. And so there are certain goals that we have. And so as a criminal justice system in the whole, we have to focus on punishment and oversight, right? Someone commits something that goes against the social norm, and there has to be consequences to that. Even in the rehabilitative restorative justice model, we recognize the necessity of punishment, but it's how we punish is a little bit different. And how we punish is kind of um, less punitive and more rehabilitative. So punishment never goes away as a goal of community corrections of any of the sentencing stuff for criminal justice. Even in restorative justice models, there's still a punishment component to it, but it's more about deterrence. And so, like, it has to be swift, it has to be certain, and it has to be proportionate. So punishment is still the goal, but also ensuring safety. So individuals who get put on probation, parole, in community corrections, also have these conditions, and the conditions are meant to ensure that they don't commit new crimes. and that they're addressing something called risk and needs. And so the risk levels show us what risk is this offender at to uh, have recidivism and recidivate. So it makes little sense to put someone in prison for 6 years for a nonviolent crime or a petty crime when they can do that time in the community because of monetary issues, because of kind of why people commit crimes and things like that. So community corrections keeps the goal of ensuring safety, but it does it a little bit different than incarceration because we're focusing on mitigating those needs and addressing those needs to mitigate risk. So I hope that makes sense. Another component of and kind of goal of community corrections in and of itself is this rehabilitation model. And so rehabilitation essentially says that the focus should be to help with all of those criminogenic needs. So I mentioned a little bit about risk needs. So all individuals who are in community corrections have what's known as a risk needs assessment. And so that's where the community corrections officer will assess through various instruments that their agencies utilize. How likely is this offender uh, to offend again? And if they're likely to offend, why? So it may be they need a job, they need to finish their education because the lack of their education gives them the lack of opportunities to get jobs or something like that. It may be because they have significant mental health issues that they're masking with substance use, and that keeps them from fulfilling kind of a 9 to 5 job thing or their duties as a parent, things like that, and it hinders them from being law-abiding citizens. And so rehabilitation is one of the main goals that community corrections kind of focuses on is let's partner with our community and our agencies in the community to help get these individuals the services that they need to address their needs. And so you see a lot of therapeutic interventions. You see a lot of kind of you've heard me talk about day reporting centers. DRCs essentially are places where offenders are serve their community corrections sentence in. So they have group that they have to go to daily. They may have individualized counseling that they go to daily. They see their probation officer daily, things like that. And then once they get done with that for the day, they can go home. But as part of their conditions, they still have to report to that institute, which is typically the probation office. But they have counselors in house. I know you've heard the DCS kind of talk about those counseling opportunities for employment, things like that. Those individuals work on the rehabilitative side. And so our goal of community corrections really falls under this restorative justice model. And so it's designed to emphasize that crime is more than just criminal behavior, and that the consequences are far reaching into the community. And so, as a part of that model, we recognize that we need to address those needs and to mitigate the risk of future harm. And so the restorative justice model, remember, brings the victim, the community, and the offender together to kind of make everyone kind of heal them back to the pre-criminogenic behavior. And so that's kind of the focus there. All right, that's going to be all for this half of the video. Make sure you click on part 2 of the lecture to kind of go about learning about the different types of community corrections as well as the process of community corrections.